Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned because it's Wednesday. That means it's Epic Comic Book Wednesday. Every Wednesday, we'll talk about a certain comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. Steve Donoghue over on his channel will talk about the same comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. It is our world's finest team up that we do once a week. And this week we have something particularly interesting for you folks who like Batman. I guess a lot of people like Batman. He's sort of popular. And we're going to be talking about Batman today. Batman from back in the 1980s. So there was this story that came out in the 1980s, and it was this one. This is Batman Year One by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. It's one of the greatest Batman stories ever told. I mean, it's amazing. It's a great Batman comic book. And we knew it, when this story came out, that it was just an incredible story. It was great stuff. And I read this when it came out in 4 issues in the Batman comic book. But I'm not talking about this great story today. No, I'm going to be talking about its sequel. Because after that story came out, over in Detective Comics, Batman Year 2 came out. And I was like, wow, a sequel. And that is this one. This is Batman Year 2. Now, this is done by entirely different people. It was written by Mike W. Barr, who wrote a bunch of Batman stories back in the day. And so he came up with this story, Batman Year 2. So I suppose I walked in this with high expectations, considering how great Batman Year 1 is. This one, well, let's talk about it. So, Batman Year 2. Mike W. Barr had an idea back at the end of the 1970s to revamp and update Batman's origin for DC Comics, and he came up with a story called Batman 1980. And so he showed the story Batman 1980 to DC Comics, and they took a look at it and said, no thanks. And so Mike W. Barr filed it away, but then he was told about how back in, I think it was 1986 or 87, whenever Batman Year 1 came out, he was told about Batman Year 1 by Frank Miller, and that they were going to be doing a Batman Year 2 in DC Comics, Detective Comics, and that he would do it. And he was like, awesome, okay. So he dusted off his old story, Batman 1980, and he put a lot of that original story, that unpublished story, into this. And it mostly doesn't work. I have to say, this mostly doesn't work. There are some good things in this. But it was an interesting misfire, and it was very strange. And so different from Batman Year 1. It was, first of all, this story, I would assume, is supposed to take place in 1 year's time, because it's Batman Year 2. And yes, time does seem to pass, but unlike in Batman Year 1, you really have no idea exactly how much time is passing. You would never know, if it wasn't for the title, that this story was taking an entire year to take place, if it even does. It's odd. And as you see on the cover, we have Batman here holding a gun. So back in the golden age of comics, when Batman first appeared, in some of those early Batman stories, Batman is holding a gun. He does use a gun for a very short time. And that's mostly because when Batman first came out, Batman was more or less based on pulp hero characters. There were some dark pulp hero characters at the time, most notably the Shadow. Batman was mostly based in a lot of ways on the Shadow. But there was also the Black Bat and some other characters around that time. And most pulp characters, most pulp heroes used guns. And Batman was basically a pulp character, really, if you think about it. He didn't have superpowers. He was just a guy who trained himself to fight criminals using all kinds of different weapons. And for a short time, he did use a gun. But it wasn't for very long. But this tries to include that idea, and it does it in a really odd way. So in this story, Batman is in his second year of operation, apparently. And we find out in this story that 20 years before, there was another vigilante who ran around Gotham City, and that was this fellow, the Reaper. So the Reaper was a vigilante in Gotham City 20 years before Batman ever showed up. And the Reaper ran around, killed a bunch of folks, and disappeared. He just vanished one day. And in this story, he reappears because, you know, he's left Gotham for a while. He comes back. It's a big steaming mess. And he feels like Batman is a crappy vigilante and just isn't getting the job done. So one of the interesting things about this story is it has some different artists. So in the first part, the first issue that came out of this story, we had Alan Davis as the penciler and Paul Neary as the artist. And that is good because they had a run on Detective Comics, which was fantastic. They are just great. They're just a great artistic team, just great art. And so they came up with, or they did, the first issue of this story. So this old fella here, this old grandpa here, he looks to be in his, mid-60s somewhere. This is the Reaper. This is in his normal identity. That's his daughter there. And the Reaper is going around town. He's saying just what a trash heap Gotham City still is. So he goes to one of his old hideouts and finds one of his old outfits, and he decides that it's time for the Reaper to come back and kill a bunch of folks. And the Reaper is serious business. I mean, no matter what little crime you might commit, it doesn't matter what it is. You could, who knows what you could do? You could do anything. You could, cross the street outside the crosswalk, and this guy would kill you. And so he shows up in his Reaper outfit, and he just goes around and starts killing folks, And so Batman is called in, and a great version of Batman here. And this first issue is actually not bad. When you start this series, right up to a certain point, right up to this point, actually, you think, man, this comic book is going to be awesome. And even though it has a very different feel from year one, I remember when this issue came out, I was kind of like, okay, this is different, but I like this artistic team, and I was down for it. But then the Reaper shows up. Now remember, at this point, Batman is in his second year. He's not super experienced, I guess, but he's pretty experienced, and he's Batman. He's spent a lifetime training and to become a physical marvel and a mental genius and all that. And then here comes this 65-year-old in some leather armor and these ridiculous scythes there on his hands. The Reaper's weapon. So the Reaper shows up. You would think Batman would make short work of this old man, but no. The Reaper just automatically, just out of the gate, just kicks the crap out of Batman. Batman doesn't stand a chance. Now remember, the Reaper is just a normal guy. We don't know what kind of training he's had, but he's been away for 20 years, probably doing not much. He's probably been sitting on the couch, drinking beer or whatever, but he shows back up and he just immediately kicks the crap out of Batman. Batman is a big wimp, and Batman is nearly killed by the Reaper. He's nearly killed by the Reaper. He has to run away from the Reaper. He has to run away. And so he runs away, and he's not in the best shape. He calls Alfred because, he's always calling Alfred. to help him. And Batman, for some reason, okay, so Batman got his ass kicked. Fair enough. So Batman is talking to Alfred and Leslie Tompkins, who is this lady that is suddenly she showed up in an earlier comic book, but suddenly she is brought back in to be a major character in Detective Comics at this time, and she knows who Bruce Wayne. She knows that Bruce Wayne and Batman are the same person, and so Batman, who's just been totally torn apart by the Reaper, is like, I used everything I had, all my skill, all my strength, and it still wasn't enough. I've always dreaded this, but perhaps the only way to avenge them is to fight my enemy on his own terms, to fight the kind of men who killed them with the weapon that made me what I am, the gun that took their lives. Now, I don't remember how Bruce Wayne ended up with the gun that Joe Chill used to kill his parents, but apparently this is that gun, and Bruce Wayne decides, I need a gun to fight the Reaper, because I'm just too much of a wimpy Batman to do it any other way. I have like a gazillion other weapons, but I've decided that I just need to pick up. There's no reason for this. This is one of the first things that makes Batman getting his ass handed to him in so easily is one thing. But then for him just to decide, oh, I need to pick up a gun to fight the Reaper, otherwise I can't do it. It just doesn't make any sense. The only reason this happens is because Mike W. Barr wanted to put certain things into this comic book. I feel like, and he didn't care how he put them in there. He just put them in there, even if they didn't make any sense. And this doesn't make any sense. This is a decision that. Anyway, so he decides all of a sudden that he needs a gun to fight the Reaper. To fight the Reaper, he needs a gun. And this is not his only bad and senseless decision in this story. This is just the first one. Now, meanwhile, our artist, Alan Davis, leaves. I don't know why he left, but he left after one issue in this story. And he is replaced, interestingly enough, by Todd McFarlane. So Todd McFarlane, who became famous almost immediately after this for Spider-Man, takes over this story. And this is early Todd McFarlane. If you're a Todd McFarlane fan, you will love it. You will love it. You will love this artwork. If you're not a Todd McFarlane fan, well, maybe not so much. But the art is at least interesting. But the art is not the problem in this story. The story is, it's the story that's the problem. Meanwhile, Bruce Wayne has fallen in love with the Reaper's daughter. He just, because they happen to meet each other as they do in stories of this type. So Bruce Wayne is falling in love, and he's actually thinking that after he takes out the Reaper, maybe he'll just quit being Batman, This thought is crossing his mind. And so Todd McFarlane does an interesting Batman. He does the Batman with the gigantic cape that is enormous, and which is fine. This cape could not exist in reality, but it's a Batman comic and not many things could. And this was before Spawn, so he's working on his whole cape thing before Spawn shows up. And we got some other confrontations with the Reaper. And now he's got his gun. Now, one thing that doesn't seem to make any sense is that Batman decides that in order to capture the Reaper, he needs to team up with a bunch of criminals to trap him. So he's going to team up with a bunch of criminals. But not only that, he runs across the person who killed his parents. He runs across the guy that kills his parents. Now, does he immediately take him out? No. No, he doesn't. He decides he'll work with this guy and, in fact, partner up with him in order to trap the Reaper? This makes no sense. Now, this whole storyline is ridiculous. First of all, why is this the only way to trap the Reaper? He couldn't think of any other way to do this. This makes no sense. This whole partnership, he partners up with Joe Chill, the person who murdered his parents. And he says, I'll just partner up with this guy long enough to capture the Reaper, and then I'll take him out. And I'll take him out with his own gun, which I'm carrying around for no reason. And so at this point, I think this was the second or third issue, I can't remember, but it was just like, I remember reading it and just thinking, this makes no sense. This makes no sense. And especially if you compare it to Batman Year One, which just came out, and just how good that was, and what a good story it was, and we all knew it at the time. And then to come out with this, it was ridiculous. So we do get some more Todd McFarlane Batman and his cape flowing everywhere scenes, which is interesting. Again, if you like Todd McFarlane, you will like the artwork in this at the very least. And we get many, many scenes, too many, of Batman hanging out with Joe Chill, the guy who killed his parents. And we have Bruce Wayne, who is romancing the Reaper's daughter, and he meets the Reaper in a civilian identity. And he promises to take care of his daughter, because as soon as the Reaper's taken out and as soon as Joe Chill is taken out, he's going to stop becoming Batman. Which, frankly, at this point, seems like maybe that's not such a bad idea, because this Batman is not great. Certainly not a great detective. If you think you're the world's greatest detective and the only way you know to catch the Reaper is this stupid plan you've got going on, lame. So anyway, we have more scenes of horrible violence as the Reaper takes people out. One thing Todd McFarlane really liked is gore. And so he has a lot of gory scenes of the Reaper taking people out, like this one. And I remember reading this and thinking, damn, this is really gory. And it was at the time, back in 1987 when this came out, for a Batman comic book, this was pretty extreme, it seemed like at the time. Now it's no big deal. Now you could put literally anything in a Batman comic. But at the time, man, this was a lot. That was a lot. And so we have Batman show up with his final confrontation, and we've got giant capes everywhere. And at the end of it all, the Reaper, I think he blows up. Doesn't he blow up? No, he doesn't. He seems to blow up, but he doesn't. And Batman thinks that the Reaper is dead, so he finally hunts down Joe Chill, the guy he's been partnered up with all this time for no good reason, to capture the Reaper. And he reveals who he really is. And he's going to kill him. I'm going to kill you, Joe Chill, for killing my parents. Remember me? He actually takes him to the alley where his parents were killed before this. But Joe Chill is shot. Bang! All the blood because Todd McFarlane is doing it. And then there's the Reaper. The Reaper's the one that killed him. The Reaper killed him. And so then Batman and the Reaper have a big fight. Like, there's a scene of Batman floating around up here. And is he on a line? Or is he just floating around? Who knows? Who knows? But we have this big fight with the Reaper. And at the end, the Reaper is hanging off the side of a building. Batman decided he could finally fight again. He does use his gun. And the Reaper ends up hanging on a building, and Batman is going to pull him to safety. And he finds out that the Reaper is, the girl's father, the girl he's in love with. It's her father is the Reaper. But he tries to save him. The Reaper's like, no, I'm good. You're a savage bastard, and you are a murderous creep just like I am. So I feel like I can die now. So he just lets go and falls off the building. And Batman decides, I'm never going to use a gun again. I mean, the whole gun thing is so stupid. It makes no sense in this whole comic book. And so he gets rid of the gun. The Reaper's daughter is all traumatized from finding out her father is was an insane vigilante and killed himself, and that Bruce Wayne just seems like a jerk, and so she decides to become a nun after all. And Bruce Wayne is left all on his own, and we have this scene of the Batman whose cape just keeps getting bigger. It just every page when McFarlane draws it, his cape just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So the artwork in this is interesting throughout. I'm not sure it's good all the way through. I'm not a huge fan of McFarlane, but it is interesting. And he did make a bunch of Batman toys later on based on his pictures in this book. But the story itself makes no sense. The story makes no sense. And it was clear as I was reading this and as everybody was reading this that the story made no sense, which is why this is mostly forgotten. It's mostly forgotten. The Reaper did return in a story by Mike W. Barr and Alan Davis, I think a year later or a while later, in a one-shot graphic novel. I don't know if the Reaper's ever returned after that. Probably, because all Batman villains return eventually. But the story itself was kind of crap. It was kind of crap with interesting artwork. And it was an interesting period of Batman. You know, we just had gotten this great story, and then we get this. We did eventually get a Batman Year 3, but I literally remember nothing about that except that I think that's the one where Robin shows up. And again, done by a different creative team. So yeah, a little slice of Batman history from the 80s. And really, this is a very 80s comic book. So there you go. I read it so you don't have to. You have a great day.